Hello and welcome to my video on why Rui Kamishiro from the hit game Project SEKAI is autistic. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the sound quality. In terms of microphone, I have no microphone. I am talking straight into my iPad right now. First off, would he meet the official diagnostic criteria? Yes, I know there are issues with it and that the system needs to be fixed and all that, but as it is right now, could we get this man an autism diagnosis? So one of the criteria is persistent social deficits in 3 separate areas. First one, emotional reciprocity ranging, for example, from abnormal social approach and failure of normal back and forth conversation to reduced sharing of interests, emotions, or affect to failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. This is a definite yes. You can really see this in his child event, Revival My Dream, where he's just info-dumping about the moth to all of his classmates instead of really engaging in the same activities as everyone else, and definitely in multiple situations fails to respond in the proper way to social interactions. Deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction, ranging, for example, from poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication to abnormalities in eye contact and body language, or deficits in understanding and use of gestures to a total lack of facial expressions and nonverbal communication. Okay, this is a bit harder considering the format of the game and how Rui is likely masking. Masking is when autistic people try to act more neurotypical because when they've acted like their true selves, they have been rejected in some way. And Rui has definitely been rejected a lot. And while he doesn't really try to hide himself, he definitely probably keep a lot of the more overt stuff under control after his childhood. And then the format again makes it really hard to see this kind of stuff. But he has been described as off-putting, I think, or scary by people who are mean to him. So I'm gonna also put this at a yes, just based off of those descriptions. Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships, ranging, for example, from difficulties adjusting behavior to suit various social contexts, to difficulties in sharing imaginative play or in making friends, to absence of interest in peers. Yes, most of all, this is definitely a trait he has. He's had a hard time making friends as a child, due to having completely different interests that he liked to a much stronger degree than his peers, which led to him realizing how different he was from them. He's often considered strange by others, and he had almost no friends for years, and he told himself he was okay with not having any friends. So he definitely has this trait. Then there are what are referred to as at least 2 of what are referred to as restrictive repetitive behaviors. Stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech, such as simple motors such as lining up toys, flipping objects, I do this thing. Why can't I say it? That thing. It used syncretic phrases. I feel like this Project SEKAI format also makes this kind of thing hard for movements because they all do the same sets of movements. I'm gonna put this more as a probably, but it's not really shown in game. Insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines or ritualized patterns of behavior, verbal or nonverbal. Examples: extreme distress at small changes, difficulties with transitions, rigid thinking patterns, reading rituals, and the need to take the same route or eat the same food every day. I don't think he likes change. Was that ever stated in canon, or was it just a vibe I'm getting from him? But I'd say this feels like another probably, but not explicitly stated. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, probably. Highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. Absolutely. It's mentioned multiple times that he likes things, namely theater and robotics, more than the average person would. Example, when he says to Mizuki in middle school, maybe my tendency to put shows at the center of everything is a flaw in mine. Everything just kind of comes down to shows to him, and he loves telling people about shows or a robot he's making. He just wants to talk about that because he loves it so very much. He's considered really smart because he knows a lot of things about these interests. He's always really curious and super excited to make something new, to learn something new about these things. Special interest. This is a special interest. This is not neurotypical behavior. Okay, sensory stuff next. Hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. Yeah, you can read that. It's right there. But basically, he seems to have sensory issues with texture, particularly the texture of food, which is so real, by the way. So real. And then, as for indifference to stuff, I'd say he can't really tell when he's hungry, which is more implied than stated, because he doesn't really seem to care or notice in backlit lens flare that he didn't eat. No one talks about this, by the way. No one has ever mentioned this, like, ever since they figured out that backlit lens flare wasn't really an angst event. No one has mentioned this. Sorry. Rambling. And then symptoms must be present in early developmental period. Basically, was this happening as a kid? Yes. Revival My Dream is literally Rui's main, this is not a neurotypical guy event. Symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. While considering that because of his peer rejection, he pushed everyone away, and then his mental health really suffered from that, and then it still affects him, although less because he got character development. Yes, this is definitely affecting him. So, clearly, we could probably get Rui an autism diagnosis. Now, another glaring reason all of Wonderland's time, showtime, is autistic. And neurodivergent people tend to bond together. I'm not going to go through the entire diagnostic criteria for them, but here's just a brief overview. First of all, Tsukasa Tenma. He struggles with empathy. I'd really say that is evident with Nene in the main story, and I think there's a bunch of other instances where he doesn't really get other people's emotions. Poor volume control, self-explanatory. He's known for having no volume control. He's considered pretty strange, which I know isn't by itself meaning a character's autism coded, but with everything else. And then I'd say theater is a special interest for everyone in Wonder Show. I think everyone in every unit really likes what they're doing, but for them especially, it just seems like everything can connect back to theater. Nene Kusanagi. She struggles with communication. Again, theater special interest. Anxiety is often common in autistic girls, and she has really bad social anxiety. She's blunt. I think there's a conversation somewhere I saw with Rin where she says she doesn't like eye contact. She definitely struggles in social situations, and she's mentioned multiple times as like not liking loud noises. So yeah, that's sensory issues with noise. Emulatori. Stimming. I would say that even though the format for Project SEKAI is pretty much hard in most aspects, she's probably like the most unmasked autistic out of all of them. And she's just like always kind of jumping around and doing things with her hands. And I know that it's just because she's like an energetic character, but even like the Wonder Boy feels very vocal stimming to me. I don't know. I might be projecting here, but I definitely think that could be considered stimming. Again, teacher special interest. With the way she's really good at telling other people's emotions, even if they're hiding them, I'd consider that hyper empathy. And if you're not familiar with autistic hyper empathy, basically some autistic people have a really hard time with empathy and don't understand how people are feeling, but sometimes you feel a person's emotions way too much, and sometimes that's not actually helpful as you would think it is. So she's got a very unique way of communication with all of her onomatopoeias when she talks. Feels very vocal stimming. And then multiple people think of her as like strange, normally in a more endearing way than when people refer to Rui or Tsukasa as strange. So you cannot convince me that Wonderland's times autism is not canon. And I feel like the fact that they are all friends and close to each other contributes further to how all four of them are autism coded. They're all strange in their own ways, and they have a lot of things in common. And this both leads to how Rui and Emu understand each other really well, but also how Nene and Tsukasa tended to clash a lot. The main story's incident probably wouldn't have happened the way it did if they weren't all autistic. Like, that incident that almost destroyed them. However, the ending, where they all unite through one TV shows to make everyone happy, that also couldn't have happened without it. Despite technically having no canon neurodivergent characters, Project SEKAI does a really good job of showing, yeah, bad things can happen because your brain is different, but also so can really good things. Like, that applies to the other Autism Club characters. I'd consider at least Toya and the Ichika as well, but also, and Haruka, but also maybe Shiho and Shizuku, maybe Minori. And to go back to the Wonder Show main story, there's a part where Rui's doing his little self-insert thing and we're hearing him perform it, and he's like, oh, something about how him and other people have fundamentally different ways of thinking, so it's okay if he's separate from them. And it just, yeah, there is no neurotypical explanation for this, okay? Now, you may be thinking, okay, why does this matter? Why should I care if the silly purple man from Project SEKAI is autistic? Well, good neurodivergent representation is really hard to find. A lot of supposed representation is neurotypicals who did very little actual research, autistic people, or just getting so many things wrong, or portraying it accurately but showing these traits as a bad thing, and sometimes even harming autistic people in real life. Characters like Rui, who aren't officially confirmed to be autistic but have a whole lot of autistic traits, are really important. Especially because his entire arc as a character has a lot to do with that, with him being autistic. The stories would not happen the way they do if he was neurotypical. His character arc would not happen the way it does if he was neurotypical. We get to see the strengths and the weaknesses of how his mind works. And yes, because it's not official, certain things you'd find in an intentional well-written autistic character aren't really present, but that doesn't make this any less important. Many people in the English Project SEKAI fandom, or just the Vocaloid fandom in general, are neurodivergent. So seeing characters that have a lot of the same struggles and traits can be really validating. And it's also so inspiring to see a character like Rui, watching his journey as a character, finding the people that accept him and the way his brain works, growing to love himself. People need to see this because being autistic is so hard. It's so hard to live in a world not built for you, or even while diluting yourself. You're always doing something wrong, or you're so good at things you're supposed to find hard, but bad at normal human things. Rui's character arc happens the way it does because he's autistic. The good things and the bad. I'm not just projecting or have a headcanon with a bit of basis. Which isn't a bad thing, by the way, because again, lack of good neurodivergent rep. If you are accurately writing him, then you wrote him as an autistic person, whether you meant it or not. Another reason this is really good is because neurotypical people in the fanbase love this character who is autistic. Sure, this might not carry over to the real world for everyone, unfortunately, and I see a lot of people in the Project SEKAI fanbase using the term, is it acoustic, and if you don't know why that's offensive, I'd recommend you check out the YouTuber I'm Autistic Now What's video on it. I will link it in the description. But who knows, people could see the things Rui went through and so stop before making comments about someone for being weird and remember, oh, I don't want to make someone feel the way Rui did in middle school. So Rui is autistic, and that is not a bad thing. Thank you so much for watching and forgiving my poor editing and recording skills.